The demo that we're going over today is a student sent in this scene that they're working on, and essentially they are doing this whole dance blocking, which is really cool. So let's see if I can just scrub through this. You can see that they're blocking out this dance, getting all of this motion in here. Beautiful motion. They haven't done the upper body, but this is a great way of blocking, especially a complex mechanic shot like this. Don't worry about the upper body first, especially like a dance. The most important thing is going to be the weight shifts in the feet. If at some point midway through a shot, you have to readjust. Oh, is the music too loud? Okay, let me tone that down. Aha, I've got a switch for this. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that's better. If it's still too loud, let me know. I can't hear, because of my headphones, I can't hear the difference between my voice and the music. So I'm relying on all of you to let me know. Awesome. So they were blocking this out, and this is a great way of blocking it out. Because once again, we don't really care what's happening with the upper body. We want to get that core working first. And if we have to switch something out, hey, we're not going to have to re-block a whole upper body pass. So this is really good. Now, the issue that's happening in this shot is that this rig that they're using has a bunch of different foot controls. So you have the main IK control right here. That's the big mover right there. And then you have a toe control right here that allows you to pivot the foot up. You've got a toe roll control, so you can actually bend the toes. And then you've got two pivot controls that allow you to rotate from the tips of the toes, like so, or from the heel, like so. So there's a lot of different controls. The problem that they ran into was, as they were working on this shot, they figured, okay, there's going to be a lot of spinning in the toes and the heel. They're going to use the toe and heel controls to spin this character around. It's going to make things easier. Very good choice, because, hey, it's going to avoid having to do a lot of counter motion. Very good. The problem is that as the shot kept going, like, look how many times those feet are spinning and rotating here. Just that one spin alone right here. There's a lot of rotations happening. And the more they rotated the feet, watch what happens here. See how the controls are no longer connected anymore. They've totally desynced with each other. They started blocking this out, and by the end, the controls no longer work because of how extreme the rotations are throughout this shot. This is something many of us will run into during our times animating. We have this brilliant idea and it makes sense. It's on paper the right thing to do. But in practice, because of something of the rig, because of something in the scene, it doesn't end up working out. But does that mean we have to reblock everything? If they take all the animation on these toe controls and remove it, and they want to put it back onto the main foot control, the main IK control, how are they going to do that without having to redo everything across this 200, nearly 300 frame shot? That's going to be a pain. So what can we do? How can we salvage this and kind of get back on track, reset the controls without losing our animation? Now, I've kind of covered this before on stream, but it's always worth kind of pointing out. And a little Danny, thank you so much for the sub. 18 months. Gee, 18. Thank you so much. A year and a half. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Also, hello. Hope you're doing well. So I've covered this before on the stream, and essentially it's using locators and baking. So this is, as a baker before I was an animator, I always love when I get to do a little bit of baking in Maya. Not the same. It's not the same as cookies or pie or bread, but it's still fun. I still enjoy it. So what we want to do here is we want to essentially save our animation that we have now. Before we reset anything, we want to make sure that what we have isn't going to be lost. So when we do this, it's essentially trying to preserve something. Okay. So we can use locators, and what we're going to do is we're going to constrain them to the feet and then bake out the animation. So let me just show you an example of this. So before we even do this, we need to think, what do we want to save? Well, one thing I definitely want to save is the motion of the heel right here. So where is the heel moving? That's going to be very crucial in making sure that when we transfer everything over, all of that motion, we know that it's in place. So I'm going to create a locator here. Let's place that right around here for now. And I'm just going to call this heel locator. And from there, I'm going to constrain it to this heel here. Now this heel doesn't really have a control assigned to it. So I can't just connect it to this control here, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain it to the vertice on the end of the heel. So if I select the shoe geometry right here, I can select this vertex right there, that point of the heel. I'll select the locator, go to constrain, and I'm going to do a point on poly constraint and make sure maintain offset is turned off. What this will essentially allow me to do is just put that in there. Now that locator is tracking the heel. Perfect. Now, this is constrained right here. We can see that it's going to follow along. And if we make any changes to the foot, it's going to keep moving. But at this point, we just want it to track the current position of the foot. And then that way, even if we reset things, it's still showing us where the heel should have been. So now that I've created that constraint, I can just take that, go to Edit, Keys, Bake Simulation here. And the thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that the sample rate here is set to 1. I want this to bake everything on ones, a key every single frame. Essentially what this will allow me to do is make sure that there's no variation, that there's no weird offsets. It's going to follow exactly. So looking at this locator here, we can now see there is no constraint data. It is just keys, and it follows along exactly where that foot should go. So you see that right through there. So now it is tracking my current animation. And if I make any changes, let's say I move the foot here now, you can see that locator is still where it should have been. So this kind of gives me a point of reference. Make sure that nothing's changed. Cool. So that's for the heel. The next thing I need is I need to figure out what is the foot going to follow. So let me kind of break this down here a little bit. The goal with what we're trying to do here is we're trying to remove the animation from these two controls right here, from the toe rotation and the heel rotation, and we want to put it onto the foot control so that the foot control is the thing that's moving throughout the entire scene. Okay. Well, to do this, we need to essentially do what we did on the heel here, have a control that we can constrain the foot to. It's going to make sense as I show it. It's a control that I can constrain the foot to in order to match that same motion. So, as I'm thinking through this, what I'm looking for is a point on this foot that is going to, how do I want to phrase this? Is going to be a stable point. So an example of this is right here. Let's say I go, okay, I want this control to, I'm trying to think of how to explain this so it makes sense and is not just super confusing. I need this to follow a point on the foot, this control right here. Well, if I have it follow the ankle, okay, that could work. That should make sense. It's going to follow the ankle and everything's going to work. Except we have moments like this, where the ankle raises up and the toes stay flat. If this big IK control were to follow this, we would get this big dip in the foot like so, and it would break the ankle. So that's not going to work. Because there's this ability to roll the foot independently of the toes, I can't track the ankle here. But what we can do is we can track the toes. Because right here, the toes aren't moving as the heel rolls. And then right there, the toes move and everything moves. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find a point that when the foot moves, it's a global motion and not just a portion of the foot moving at certain points. Just the heel or just the toes or just something like that. Because it's going to mess things up. Again, it's very confusing to say it out loud here. Hopefully it'll be clear when I actually show it. So we've got our heel tracked. Let's track the toes now. Now for the toes, I can actually just use this control right here, because that's going to be the tip of the toes. Even if I check all the way through to the end of the shot, you can see that's still the toe control right there, making sure that that pivot point stays right on the end of the toes all the time. So yeah, right there, tip of the toes. Perfect. So that I can use that to constrain my locator. So let's create a new locator. We're going to call this toe locator. And then let's scale it up here a little bit. I'm going to constrain it to this control right here. Okay, so I'm going to select the toe control, then the locator, constrain parent, and then I'm going to once again make sure maintain offset is turned off. This is going to snap that locator right to that point. Voila. Cool. So once again, this is now following that foot control perfectly, but we want it to stay still. If I make any adjustments on these controls, for example, zeroing everything out, I don't want to have to deal with some weird extra motion in there. So to do this, I'm going to, once again, bake out that locator. I'm going to select the locator, go to Edit, Keys, Bake Simulation. That's going to get it back down to ones. Let it go through the whole thing. There we go. Now, a good thing to do before we do anything else is also track the PV control for the knee, because that knee is going to be moving around. And if we make any adjustments to these controls here, we could be messing up our knees through the whole shot. So once again, I'm going to create another locator. There we go. Then select the knee PV and the locator, constrain parent, and make sure that locator is called knee locator. There we go. And bake it out. Cool. So with all of this, essentially we now have a locator for the heel, the toes, and the knee, which means that regardless of what we change on the foot, we have some sort of backup that shows us where things were before. And let me just, okay, I wanted to make sure that the knee PV was still in place there. Cool. So what do we need to do now? Well, we've got our positions there. At this point, I could essentially just delete any animation that we have on this foot control right here. Our goal here is that we want to transfer it on top of this IK control. Have that be the thing that's actually controlling our foot. So let's actually go through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a frame where the foot is flat on the ground. That way it's kind of at a neutral position. And then let's take our animation. And first we're going to constrain the IK control to the toes right here. So select the IK control, or sorry, the locator here. I'm using the toe locator, then the foot. Take that, constrain parent. Maintain offset, we're going to turn that on this time because we don't want it to snap. So essentially the foot control is going to now follow this IK control right there. Cool. Now if we start scrubbing through, we're just going to get a mess because now we've still got animation going on, but now the locator is also following. We could have easily broken all of this, especially as we go later on here. Things might actually, surprisingly didn't break anything. Yay. So, lucky us. But let's undo that. Go back to our stationary pose here. And oops, I think I undid my constraint. So, locator, foot, constraint, parent. Okay, there we go. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete the animation on the heel and on the toes here. So I'm just going to go into my graph editor, delete everything that we don't need there. Boop, like so. Heel, same thing. We're not going to need any of this animation here. Well, actually, no, the heel we can probably keep. Let's be double check here. Yeah, because right here, the heel is raising up, so we can keep that. That's not going to be a problem for us at all. Okay. So from there, we can keep all of this. It's not got, it doesn't have any weird rotations. Let's double check that at least. Okay. We can get rid of the rotations. Essentially, we don't want any of the twists of the foot to come from any other control aside from the IK right here. Okay. So we've got that. And then, at this point, okay, that's the roll attribute right there. At this point, we can now just take our foot control and bake things out. So we want this to just follow what the IK control is doing. Sorry, not the IK, the locator. Because the locator is leading this foot right now. If I was to delete all of our translates and rotates, just kind of as an example here. Translates, just get rid of all of that. Boop. Rotates. Boop. So you can see there's no animation on those translates and rotates. The foot is still animated. It's still moving the way it should because it's following that locator. So let's bake things out. So I'm going to take my foot IK control, go to Edit, Keys, Bake Simulation. So once again, just let that bake. And voila. Now it is no longer constrained. You'll see we've got a ton of keys in here. It's going to be a mess for now. We're going to clean that up in just a second. But you'll notice that now that foot is still animated, doing exactly what it should right through here. And if we look at our shot on the shot camera there, it's still all animated, doing its thing. But now instead of having the heel control and the toe control going in, we just have the one IK control. And at the end here, all the controls are still in line. Essentially, we created locators to save the position of where we wanted our foot to be, and then constrained the foot onto it and baked it out to essentially realign our animation with a different control. Hope that makes sense. I know it's a lot of different constraints in there. Now, what does this give us now? Well, it gives us the easy way to clean things up. So first off, let's get rid of all of these extra keys because this is a nightmare. So I'm going to take all my translates and rotates right here in the graph editor, and I'm going to go to curves and then simplify curves. And this will just get rid of a lot of the extra keys where we don't need them. I will have to go in and polish some stuff up, but that's not going to be too bad. So from there, let's go through here. From there, what can we do? Well, I'm going to double check my positioning. So as the foot comes down here, for example, it's using the roll attribute right there to roll the heel. So let me actually just make sure that I don't have any translates or rotates in that section. This is where we just want to double check certain things. But it looks like there's some extra keys in here, I'm just going to copy the foot from this position here, frame 1, break key everything. There we go. And then clean that up. So there's always going to be a little bit of cleanup here. That's not a problem. Go right there. Now we get that foot roll nice and neat. Still got a little bit of wiggling there, so there we go. Now we just got that roll attribute coming down right through there. And it looks like I accidentally keyed this roll on frame 1, so let me move that up there. So there we go. We get that nice step. I'm going to have to go through my curves. Like you'll notice there's a little bit of a bounce in there in the heel, a translation. I'll have to go through there, clean that up. But at this point, it's just a matter of polish. That's not going to be too bad, but I'm not dealing with all of these weird offsets. Now, you'll also notice that we get frames like this. What the heck happened? The knee has exploded. Well, what's happened is that the knee PV, because we readjusted our animation and which controls we're animating the foot with, the knee PV in this case, right here, is no longer following where it used to be, which means that our leg is going to explode in certain points. And that's definitely not what we want. So what I can do now is we created this locator before, the knee PV locator, that followed where the knee used to be. Well, let's just once again do a constraint and bake it out. So I can take my knee PV here, and I'm going to constrain it to the knee locator that I had done before. So select the knee locator, then the knee PV, constrain, and I'm going to have to do a point constraint here because it's only translations. I'm going to go once again to maintain offset, turn that off, apply. There we go. And take the knee PV. You'll see it's constrained. And if we look at the shot, hey, no more knee explosions. It's fixed. Perfect. Well, now I need to just bake this out. So edit, keys, bake simulation. Let that go through. And then let's just clean up our curves here once again. So select all of those, curves, simplify curve. Right there. Get rid of all those extra keys in there. At this point, if I wanted to, I could get rid of our locators. We don't really need them anymore. They're just there as kind of placeholders if we did want to just keep them as basically just in case. But at this point, I don't really need them. And I can just go in and start cleaning up my shot here. I'm going to just go in here and simplify these curves again because we've still got some with a ton of keys. There we go. That's better. So we have this. The animation is pretty much exactly the same. Nothing looks that visually different. There's going to be a few small differences, but essentially, instead of having our controls where we have all of these separate rotations on a heel and a toe control, and they're starting to separate out the value so you can kind of see it here. Hey, look at this foot right there. How you have the IK foot over here, and then the foot is over there. The heel control is over here, and it's rotating from completely the wrong area. Instead, we now have this, where everything is still in line, and I'm just animating this one IK control to do everything I need. Done. Now, is one better than the other? Not really. It really just depends on what you want to deal with. There's going to be kind of pros and cons to each type of control that you use. But at least to me, using this, I'm a fan of not having to try and fight controls, especially when they're all offset from each other. For example, like if we have a situation, let's say here, where this foot needs to roll down, like that, and then roll up on the heel, how can I roll it up on the heel? I can't. I would have to start taking my IK control and try to rotate that. Well, that doesn't work anymore. Can I take a roll attribute here? Nope. Now it's going off to the side there. Suddenly I have no control over getting this heal in there other than doing some sort of snap where I reset all the controls and then I have to try and match these positions. That's a pain. Whereas with this foot, since they're always in line, I easily can just go, yep, done. The heel has a nice little hop in there. So that's kind of my preference. So with that, I would just do the exact same things now on the other foot. So create a locator for the toes, a locator for the heel, a locator for the PV, bake them all out after constraining them, and then just constrain the IK foot to the toe control, or I should say to the toe locator, because that's going to give us that motion that we need. Done. So that's really it. So hopefully that makes sense. I know again, it's very confusing when you're trying to do this and you're trying to like just look at it and go, what the heck? But the more you kind of do this kind of stuff, the easier it becomes. And this is a really good tool just to have in your arsenal because it allows you to not be, how to put it, not be locked in one method of animating. So for example, in this case, we animated with 2 different controls and what should have been a really easy method of approaching this animation became a nightmare. Well, because we made one mistake, we don't have to pay for it and have to reblock our whole shot. We can just build off of it. Sure, that control didn't work, but hey, let's just bake out some stuff and do a few quick constraints. Poof, keep on animating. We didn't lose anything. We're just continuing where we left off with a whole other way of animating. It can speed up your workflow a lot because you're suddenly not having to reset things all the time. An example of this is, let's say you're animating the hips and you're using the cog for all of your rotations and translations and everything. And then you find out halfway through, oh shoot, I need to be able to have the cog only do the translations and then rotate using the IK hip control instead. Well, once again, if you do this kind of constraints and baking, it's not that hard to separate out all your animation and not have to rebuild everything from scratch. So I hope this is helpful. I hope it makes sense. If anyone does have other questions on that, definitely let